What is up, Dynasty Leaguers? Welcome into another episode of Drafting Lessons, the DLF TV show where I grab a guest every single week and we mock draft a Dynasty startup or rookie mock. Or today it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a new one. We're in mid-July now, so it's the redraft season. Basically, a lot of people are gearing up for the 2020 season. Hopefully it happens, but we're gearing up here for our redraft leagues as well. So for over the next couple of weeks, as we get into the actual season, we're going to actually start doing some redraft mock drafts, and I'm going to have a lot of awesome guests on. I'm trying to plan out a lot of the people I'm going to have on in August, draft some footballers on here, maybe a couple other big names as well too. So the first guest I have on here today, I consider a big name. I hope you guys all know him from the FF Fellas, Kyle August. Kyle, man, how's it going on?
Dude, it's good, Addison. I appreciate the invite. When I saw this, you had actually messaged me, like, it was pretty late. I just happened to be up. We were traveling for a camping trip. I think it was like 3 a.m. my time. So I messaged you like right back. I was like, oh, heck yeah, man. And this was good. It worked out nice. Just got back. So was a little bit tired yesterday, but was pretty pumped to get my week started with recording this show with you, man.
Awesome, man. Yeah. So, I mean, with you being – you were on the Fellas, and that was a long stretch. That was fantastic, dude. I loved that show. That was one of the first, redraft specific shows that I really got into whenever I came into the industry, started listening to podcasts because, I was driving to school and then I would be at school, drive back home, all that stuff. It was like you and the Ballers and then a couple other like DLF podcasts. So it was really awesome for you guys and to watch your run and everything. And it was heartbreaking for me. I can only imagine what it was like for you whenever that decision to kind of end it there. But I'm glad you got a new venture going on here. So, but I'm really happy to have you on here. We can talk about the Smackdown at the end here. We can plug that out because that's really awesome too. But I'm super happy to have you on because you are a pretty redraft oriented guy, and so I'm glad to have you on here for the first episode of the redraft series here. And this is for all the people watching, you might notice that we're doing this kind of on Sleeper, which is completely new for at least the drafting lessons we've originally been doing on Fantasy Pros. But we're doing it on Sleeper, and I'm going to be joining in on this as well too. So we randomized the order here. I got the 1-2, Kyle got the 1-5. So Kyle, right before we get into this here, I guess I'll ask you, do you have any specific or maybe general redraft strategies, maybe any tendencies that you've been noticing for this year, specifically heading into 2020? Maybe if you want to talk about maybe specifically from your 1-5 spot or anything in general that you've kind of noticed.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best part, I think this is great that you're doing this even on the DLF platform because I'm a big Dynasty player as well. Going into this year, I think I'm probably going to be almost 2-1 Dynasty versus redraft as far as just the ratio goes. I mean, we always focused on redraft when recording the Fellas podcast, and especially like kind of in season. First off, I mean, it's just an honor to be mentioned with some of those names that you were talking about in a podcast rotation. I mean, that was always our goal. Like, not to be we didn't need to be the only podcast you listen to. We just wanted to be one of them. So we definitely like in season wanted to make sure that we gave great information for anyone because everybody's setting lineups, right? Like once you get in season, obviously trading and potentially how you approach the waivers differs from league to league, but just those week to week start sit decisions, those are important. So I think that, it's a good thing though to remind yourself as a Dynasty player is that when you're shifting your focus to a redraft league is truly to know like, man, you're really just playing for this year. And even though that seems like a basic concept, when I draft with like the diehard players that I know, and I'm in other Dynasty leagues when I do redraft leagues with them, man, it's still like kind of heavy towards some of those Dynasty sweethearts and, rookies and those types of things. And when you're in it, man, for just that 1 year, you're clearly just looking for the short-term success. I mean, it sometimes it can be, as even a short term as like, hey, just get me through the first 4 to 6 weeks here because I have, maybe some of these future assets that might help me out, down the stretch. I mean, as a great example, I was talking about this on another podcast, like Mark Ingram, like he's somebody in Dynasty people just can't get rid of fast enough type of thing, right? Like they're just like, he's over 30, he's on the rookie, a high rookie draft pick coming in and, all this regression from, a crazy touchdown percentage rate, so like he's somebody that nobody wants. But in redraft, if I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I think Mark Ingram's, he's still somebody that they trust. He's got a rookie coming in. I think he'll get you off to a hot start through that first, maybe month or so or 6 weeks. So like those are guys that I'm kind of, at the right value I'm targeting, right? So I think overall that's just a great thing to keep in mind is we're all dynasty players. If you're checking this out, you're all diehards, plugged in, but just kind of keep in mind that you do have to kind of flip that mindset a little bit. Just overall, man, I think just as we're heading into redraft season a little bit more, it is mid-July. For me, it's definitely the approach of, look for those, the running backs are really important in all formats just because it does thin out a little bit quick. But I think the biggest decision that you're going to make this year, again, is similar to last year, and it's where you decide to take that tight end. If you're committed to streaming each week, then you never have a problem no matter what year it is. You just wait it out, and then you hope you hit on somebody that pops that year. But in this year compared to last is that I really think it comes down to just a big two. I really do like Zach Ertz. I think he's a little bit underrated. I think putting Mark Andrews over him might be a little bit premature, but they're more in the same tier as opposed to putting Ertz with that Kelsey and Kittle tier. So I think both of us having an early pick here, we probably don't have to make that decision in round one, but we'll see how round two turns out. But kind of just overall, man, I think this is it's going to be an interesting year when you factor in as well that kind of the unknowns of how much time these rookies get, early on and how much impact they're going to have early on in the season. So it's going to be an interesting July and August.
Yeah, for sure. And I love just to kind of echo what you were saying about how, when you're a primary dynasty player, that's your mindset all year to then come into a redraft league and you have to separate yourself from, like you said, those dynasty darlings. I've seen a lot of people, Scott Fishbowl's going on right now, and there's a lot of dynasty centric people in there. And then there's a lot of those rosters that I'm seeing from that Josh ADHD app of all these rosters. And man, I can't help but think, a lot of these look really good dynasty teams, but redraft, it's kind of sketchy. There's a lot of rookie wide receivers in there. It's still a great class, but again, we're just looking at 2020, and I feel like a lot of people, a lot of dynasty people specifically kind of have trouble separating between the two, especially whenever that's your, like I said, your mindset for like the last, basically since the end of 2019. So yeah, I'm happy to get this going here, and we'll see how this pans out. For all the people watching out there, we're going to do 13 rounds today. Just one quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex as our starting requirements. And then the rest, it's I think 6 bench spots that gets us to 13. So PPR, no premiums, no super flex. This is just about as basic of a redraft league as you can get, but it's going to be really fun here, and I think we should just get right into it here. Since I have the 1-2, yep, McCaffrey makes sense.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I don't really think I need to talk too much about this pick. It's going to be Saquon Barkley, and I think that's pretty easy. Do you have a different 102 after McCaffrey, or is it Saquon?
No, it's Saquon. I do have Elliott in the same in the same tier as those 3. I guess I don't think that's going to be a surprise to most people to see those first 3 go off the board. Even in this, I do think that those 3 players are definitely kind of in a tier from everybody else. But I do have Barkley at 2, and yeah, I think it's kind of a no brainer there. So that's definitely the pick. I'm sitting here now at the 105. I definitely have those top 3, like I mentioned. And then between 4 and 5, it comes down to actually the 2 Saints players that are both sitting on the board here for me. And as I mentioned, your running back strategy and redraft is going to be important this year because it does drop pretty quick. I do lean more towards taking the running back in most cases because a wide receiver is such a deep position. And obviously dynasty players out there, people that are super plugged in, you can really, make that work. The position is so deep. You can just grab your guy in round 4 or 5 and know that you're still going to be able to get those later round guys that, the more, average Joes out there, especially if you kind of land more of a home league, that's easy. But the position is still so deep. I still generally go running back in round 1. This is PPR. Kamara would have been my guy here. I thought he was going to be my pick at 105, but Michael Thomas is still just above and beyond so much everybody else at the wide receiver position. For me, he's my wide receiver 1. And he's going to be my pick here at 105. I think his success continues to what we saw last year with Drew Brees. Again, this is just 1 year, so I don't care who the quarterback in 2021 is.
Interesting. The way you were talking about that, I was like, oh, he's going Kamara here for sure. And I was gonna ask him, like I was gonna ask you, assuming that you took Kamara, I was like, okay, let's assume Kamara was gone and it was between Thomas and Derrick Henry, because I feel like a lot of redraft leagues is going to be, those are going to be the first 4 picks in some sort of order: McCaffrey, Barkley, Zeke, and Kamara, right? Then you're sitting at 1-5, and I think a lot of people this year are going to be asking themselves a lot if they're in those middle rounds, when do you not take a running back in favor of Michael Thomas, right? And maybe it's not so much the spot, and it's between Thomas and, X running back and after him, so I'm curious on if, I guess it probably still would have been Thomas because you took Thomas over Kamara, but Thomas over Derrick Henry, same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, especially in PPR, if you're talking half PPR, it becomes closer, if a standard scoring non-PPR league, you probably lean Henry in that route, but with it being full PPR and Henry it's not like some running backs where, he's only going to catch you 30 passes. Like if Derrick Henry gets to 15, you're celebrating. So right. On the season, I think Henry for me takes a hit. I mean, I'll take, I probably would have taken the shot on, even Dalvin Cook over him, even with some of his question marks. But and Miles Sanders is somebody else that I'm really high on that I think will be heavily involved in the passing game that is in that conversation in PPR. So yeah, I think that it's the 4 running backs usually, but with Michael Thompson there 105, just couldn't pass it up. And this is why you have that question, is at 105, I took a wide receiver. There was only 5 wide receivers off the board. It's back to me here in the second round. And when you look at the running back position, I'm staring down guys, a lot of the more proven guys, some of the guys coming off big years, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones, those guys are off the board. So now I'm sitting here and, do I feel comfortable with my RB1 being, Austin Eckler, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think both these guys have really high ceilings, but their floors are, there's concerns there as well. There's out of their mouths to feed with Eckler. You're talking about an offense that while the coaching staff, the coordinators are in place, man, how much do I trust Tyrod Taylor? How much do I trust when they make that switch to Justin Herbert? I think that which will come later on in the year. So, that's definitely a spot when you don't take a running back in round 1. Now you're looking at a little weaker at that position in the later rounds, and you're going to have to piece those positions together. So for me, it comes down to 2 guys in this spot. Travis Kelce, like I mentioned, where you take a tight end is going to be an important question among fantasy owners, redraft players this year. George Kittle is still on the board here. I would have definitely considered him, except for the fact there's still 1 wide receiver that I think is in that top tier of players. So this will be wide receiver 6 off the board. And I'm going to go ahead and go wide receiver. I'm going to go Chris Godwin. I think that I'd take him over DeAndre Hopkins with some of the concerns of if he's going to reach, his 150 target number. I think him and Julio Jones are pretty close. And to get Chris Godwin here for me is a steal. I would have gone Kelce if Godwin was already off the board, but luckily for us, Lamar Jackson went in this simulation. So you got to love that, man. You in one quarterback leagues, especially, you're not reaching for that QB. The reason we all loved Mahomes and Jackson the last 2 years is because you got him in the double-digit rounds in redraft leagues. So no reason to pay the price for that.
I love that. And I think what I'm really going to enjoy about watching you build out your redraft team here is how you go about with the 2 wide receiver start, right? Because a lot of people talk about how deep the wide receiver class is this year, the wide receivers in general this year. You can grab guys like Juju Smith-Schuster or Amari Cooper in like the 4th round or whatever, potentially late 3rd. So there's, just a whole wide range of wide receivers that you might be comfortable with as your wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, kind of like a 1A, 1B kind of thing. And so that's why a lot of people say hammer out the running backs at the beginning, because the ADP dictates that, if you pass up on those running backs, you're going to be hurting when you get to these middle rounds here. So I'm excited to see where you go. And to be honest with you, at that point, it would have been, for me, probably Austin Eckler at that position. And if Eckler wasn't there, I was not taking Todd Gurley that early. I would not take Clyde Edwards-Helaire that early. And then, there's all these other running backs down here that have a lot of question marks in themselves, like Fournette, James Conner, Le'Veon, a lot of these guys that I don't feel like are worth a 2nd round pick. So I love the Chris Godwin pick. He definitely was the best wide receiver that I would have, and the guy that I would have taken if I went the wide receiver route. But I would have went Austin Eckler I mean, it's entirely up to you. but
no,
but
I would have gone out of those three again, like with Kittle still being there. I would have gone Godwin, Kittle, and then Eckler was definitely my top running back still on the board. I still think he's going to be heavily involved in the receiving game. It's just, there's definitely the question mark of, he was killing it without Melvin Gordon, and then as soon as Gordon came back, the attempts almost got cut in half. He had no rushing touchdowns after Melvin Gordon came back. So I still think Eckler is a low end RB1 and worthy of a second round pick. But man, I think Godwin, there's less question marks. I think that team's going to continue to chuck it around, even with old Tommy there in Tampa.
I love it. I'm definitely not against Chris Godwin. Penn Stater, so I'm about it.
There you go.
My decision here is rough.
Yeah. I don't think there's an obvious one, bro. Like, there's not one where I'm like, that's a no-brainer pick. Like, you already had that at 102, so now you got to make tough decisions.
Right. Like I'm debating. Like, George Kittle looks really nice here, right? Mm-hmm. Like at the end of the second round, you got a nice tier gap between him and Mark Andrews. The wide receivers, there's a lot of names here that I would really, really like to have. And I'm also kind of debating, because I'm on the turn here, who are the two players going to be that they take on the turn, and who's going to come back to me, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm wondering, if I pass on Kittle, am I going to be able to get him at 3-2? Right. But if I do that, like, I'm not seeing like another obvious answer here at a different position. Like, a lot of people really like Clyde, and they're probably yelling at me to take Clyde right now. But like, I'm not sure like how I view his 2020 season, right? Like, I love him for Dynasty, RB1, RB2 in Dynasty in this rookie class. But I mean, for 2020, like, I still think Damian has some sort of a, of a role this year, at least to begin with. It's kind of the same narrative for all these rookie running backs. And then, like, when does Clyde take over? But then again, if Clyde does take over, like, if Damian wasn't there and Clyde was taken without Damian, he'd be up in the first round.
Yeah.
So there's that whole thing as well too. And then I'm still not looking at quarterbacks either. Like, the half Billy man is awesome here, but it's still too early. The opportunity cost is just too great. So I think I'm going to, oh man, I don't like this. I'm so glad that we're doing this though, but I don't like this.
Yeah.
I'll take Kittle here.
Yeah.
I think that's what we'll do.
I think that's the way to go. I think especially when you're looking at it, like, there wasn't anybody that jumped out. There were a few wide receivers I really liked there, even, and obviously you already have one running back, so you're at least in good shape there. But just the idea of, like, you got to keep that out of your mind a little bit, like, as far as if you're drafting and like, oh, is Kittle too early at this spot? Well, you might as well take him now, knowing that that there's another tier of receivers. As long as you get one of those, or there's a tier running back or whatever that you're going to get at that next pick. So you're secure that you got George Kittle. If you went, over the turn there, now you're missed out. So I think that's the right pick. And it's going to set you up where now you can just completely ignore that position, as opposed to either having to spend maybe multiple picks on a tight end, or the idea of, if we played this out, clear the idea of streaming and really keeping an eye on it.
Right. So now I'm back here. Mahomes and Mike Evans went. I wasn't expecting Evans to be the one taken, but that's okay, because, to be honest, the other guy that I was debating on my last pick with Kittle was actually Kenny Golladay, who I really like this year. And I think a lot of people are not viewing him as a wide receiver one, even though I think that we should be. He was a wide receiver one last year without Matthew Stafford for half the season. So, the upside is all there for for Kenny Golladay. And I think I would rather go him versus, again, all those running backs that I had mentioned that were at my pick at 211, Clyde, Fournette. Like, I'm not really in on a lot of those guys, and I feel like I could just grab a solid RB2 to pair with Saquon later in, like, these mid rounds. So I think I'm feeling really good with my pretty balanced approach here, grabbing 1-1-1 at the three positions here. So I like it a lot.
Yeah, I like Kenny G too, man. I think he's going to be somebody that they still got a lot to prove on the defense, there in Detroit. I think they're going to have to continue to throw the ball quite a bit. I think it was a surprise to everybody that Bevel came in and didn't just run the ball. Like, that's what we were all expecting. So maybe them adding Swift, early in the draft changes that a little bit. But Kenny G, he's a legit stud. They've really done nothing to add any additional pass catchers there in Detroit. So I think that Kenny Golladay is going to be, a wide receiver one this year. He probably, looking at it, probably would have been the pick for me as well, sitting at that spot. Man, I was sitting here in the third, and usually I pretty much pencil him in almost every draft in the third round, and that's Leonard Fournette. He went off the board one pick before me. I don't think he is a guy that he's like a top 10 running back by any means. I think that there's some regression probably coming as far as, it's tough to, I think games played obviously was a big thing he overcame last year. The reception numbers were crazy. I think he had 100 targets in 2019, but I think that the touchdowns, or lack thereof, will balance out a little bit. So I like Fournette as a third round value, and he went one pick ahead of me. Clyde would have been the other pick, and they both went it. So now I'm sitting here, some of the running backs on the board, there's just nobody that I love. So, Carson and redraft again, keeping that mindset. Penny, I don't think he's going to be a pup list candidate. Carson saw a heavy workload over the last few years. He's 240, 250 attempts, I think, in the bag. But he's not heavily involved in the passing game here. And in PPR, you can still get away with maybe a guy that's a little less involved in the run game, but is going to catch those passes. So, man, as much as I said, I think Zach Ertz is being a little bit underrated. I just think that there's too much value here. I'm going to just take my third receiver in this spot. And there are so many good options. And he's a little bit further down the list. So it's always important too, to know where you're playing. And I talk about this on our pod. I've talked about this in the past, but knowing where your draft room is, because if you're playing with people that are just going to settle by what the room is telling them to do, they might miss out on some good value. So I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. And at the 305, I'm going to take DJ Moore. He was a guy that is heavy, saw a heavy target load last year. Their defense is going to be horrendous in Carolina this year. They spent all their draft picks on the defense for a reason. They lost their leader in Luke Kuechly, and having Teddy Bridgewater there, man, as much as I'm not a huge Teddy Bridgewater fan, it can't get any worse than last year. So I think DJ Moore is definitely a candidate to, potentially even break out. And even if he just does what he did last year, I still feel good about that. So
I would have taken DJ Moore if Kenny Golladay wasn't the guy that went. I would have taken DJ Moore. So I'm definitely in on that pick. Everything that you just said, I love DJ Moore as a breakout this year. He was wide receiver 15 or 14, I think, last year. And he missed, I think it was 2 or 3 games. I think it says he played 14, but he got hurt on the first drive of his 14th game.
Yeah, I think I was in the playoff. Yeah, I think it was in the fantasy playoffs. So that really stung.
So for all intents and purposes, he played 13, and his 16-game pace out with what he was doing last year with, like you said, Kyle Allen, he would have been a top 8 or 7 wide receiver last year if he just kept playing out the rest of the year. So I love it. I'm all in. I think Teddy Bridgewater is going to be a lot better than a lot of people think that he is. I don't think he's going to be as good as he was in New Orleans last year, but I definitely think he's going to be better than what people remember him in Minnesota from. And then also you got the additions of Matt Rule, Joe Brady, and you can't really double team DJ Moore either, because that offense is low key really explosive. You got Christian McCaffrey, Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson as well too. Ian Thomas isn't a terrible tight end. So, I mean, DJ Moore is going to be the focal point, but but he shouldn't be the focal point of a defense, because there's so many other options for them defensively to have to kind of contain and account for. So I'm all in on DJ Moore. I love it. Dynasty redraft, give me all the DJ Moore, especially in the mid third. I'm about it.
Yeah, love it. Good deal. Glad we're on the same page. That always makes it easier. I'm sitting here back in round 4. So we're heading towards the end of the round here. A few receivers count the board, a few running backs, again, that I like. Usually in this spot kind of came off here. So you just got to adjust. I'm not going to necessarily reach on a guy just because he's not there. But looking at the board now, the 2 teams direct between us have gone running back, which didn't help my case going all receivers and trying to find value there. But so there's those teams, even though, again, this is just a simulation, right, is that it's probably still unlikely that those teams are going to go running back maybe at either of their picks. So I'm going to bank on the fact that I think that maybe only 2 or 3 come off the board here. There's some guys I like at this spot. I still think Melvin Gordon right now is somebody that will still have value. I think Gordon's pass catching prowess is still something that's going to be relevant in Denver. Philip Lindsay is he's a good player, but he hasn't really proven to be a great pass catcher, despite the fact that everyone will just automatically link him to that because he's small. in stature, right? Then those guys are just great pass catchers. Right. So it hasn't really played out yet. I still think Devin Singletary is a guy that I think will still have, nice value as far as touches go. Mark Ingram, like I said, can get you off to a hot start. And then you kind of get into that rookie realm on guys that, could be, if they get the opportunity, could be really solid players on your team. There's a lot of wide receivers I still really like here as well. Again, it's a deep position, but I think I have 3 solid studs. So I'm actually going to go the route of not having to worry about the tight end position, and I'm going to go ahead and just take Zach Ertz here. ADP might tell you that it's a little early at this pick, but I do think that he's going to be somebody that sees a ton of targets this year again in Philadelphia, even though they added Rager there and hopefully get some healthy bodies in that offense. But I still think Zach Ertz is near an elite tight end. So I'm going to go there.
So I don't know if you saw, but I made a face when you said that Zach Ertz isn't going to get targets. But if anybody else noticed that, it was because I looked at who got taken after your pick, and it was the 2 guys that I was hoping would make it to me. I was hoping one of them would make it to me. So I made a face that I whenever I saw that they were both gone, of just sheer disappointment and sadness, and it coincided with you saying that Zach Ertz isn't going to get targets.
I do think Ertz is going to see a ton of targets still. What we saw in 2 years ago was crazy, but I still think he's going to do at least what he did last year, which was still really good. And at this spot, I don't mind taking the tight end just because there's not a running back I love. But yeah, Robert Woods would have been the other guy for me. It would have been perfect for your squad, man, as the wide receiver too there. Yeah,
with Zach Ertz, I think a lot of people have kind of been talking about Ertz's downfall for a couple years now, because they're like, man, he really is just a benefactor of injuries, right? They don't really have anybody else to throw to. He has to be the guy. And so they're like, well, this year he's got all these new weapons back. Alshon comes back, Djax comes back. They drafted Jalen Reagor, Miles Sanders is in the backfield, blah, blah, blah. But realistically, Alshon could start the year on the PUP. Djax is injury prone, and also, with that whole thing, I don't know. I don't even know if he's going to be on the team. I feel like he is, just because they don't have anybody else. Yeah. So they're just going to be kind of slap him on the hand and just be like, all right, go out there and catch. And then they're already talking about Rager taking a back seat, at least at the beginning, right? So once you take those 3 out, who else is there to throw to? I think this season for the Eagles is going to look a lot like 2019. And I think a lot of people might not be expecting that. And so Ertz is starting to slip a little bit, because they're expecting better weapons for Wentz and Ertz to kind of take a back seat in the target share. But in reality, I think it's going to be kind of similar, and Ertz is still going to be as fantastic as he has been for the past 2-3 years, even with Goddard there as well too. Yeah. They both can succeed. We saw that last year. But it's Ertz's show if he's healthy instead of Goddard. So I really like that, especially whenever you think if he's going to produce maybe a point or 2 points per game away from maybe Kittle, and you got him at a 2-round discount, that's super awesome there.
Yeah. Great. Awesome.
So now I got to figure out who I'm going to pick, because I was really hoping that one of Melvin Gordon and Robert Woods was going to be there.
Woods was, even though it would have been a bench player, I love Robert Woods this year, man. I think he's going to be a stud. They threw the ball so much in LA last year. That's going to continue. They got rid of Wade Phillips, so that I think that defense takes a little bit of a step back, and they continue to chuck it. Woods, he was in consideration even just as my 4th wide receiver there. So yeah, that would have been sweet. His value at the end of the 4th is a beautiful thing, I think.
Yeah. So I kind of have a plan here. I'm just looking to see if I can do this if I can fade wide receivers for another 3 rounds. I think I can. So this is going to be interesting to see if I can pull this off, because I don't know if this guy here at the turn is going to ruin this. Yeah. But here in the 4th round, I think I'm going to take the shot on Jonathan Taylor, who, again, I think has a very similar situation to Clyde Edwards-Helaire that we already talked about, in the fact that Marlon Mack is still there. Oh, yes, it worked. Mack is still there, and I think Mack is going to be a starter, or at least eat into Jonathan Taylor's workload at the beginning. But then we're going to get to a point at some point in the season where, Frank Reich is just like, dude, we can't take Jonathan Taylor off the field. And when that happens, Taylor's going to eat behind that offensive line. And then if he's out there for the majority of the snaps, he's going to get targets just naturally, maybe not as many as we want, but he's going to have some sort of a receiving production, at least some sort of a baseline. If it's like 2 for 20 or 3 for 30 kind of thing, like that's all I really need from Jonathan Taylor when he's putting up 100-yard games rushing, Then when he scores and blah, 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 does all that. I like it in the 4th rounder. I'm curious to see if you're in on Taylor there too.
Yeah, I do like Taylor. You definitely go in that with that mindset. Now you can, as you're building your team out, you can find a guy maybe that, again, you're going to start the first, maybe 2 to 3 weeks just because you have more confidence with him over what Taylor's role might be. You kind of want to see that played out. So I think that's great. And you have with Rivers there, plenty of running back targets to go around in Indy.
Yeah. So like you said, a guy that I can take for the first few weeks, we kind of talked about him beforehand. I'm going to take Mark Ingram here.
Yeah.
As my solid RB2 to start and just kind of be the fill-in for until Jonathan Taylor comes out. And I mean, in kind of the same sense with Jonathan Taylor, Ingram's on the opposite side where I think a lot of people expect J.K. Dobbins to take over that backfield. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, I think it'll be Mark Ingram's show, like how it was last year as well too. And so kind of while I'm waiting for Jonathan Taylor to, kind of ripen up halfway through the season, I can use Mark Ingram and just slide him in there. And I kind of just piecemealed an RB1, I think, or at least a fringe RB1, high-end RB2 with the 2 picks here. And I think both of them are going to have standalone value as well too. I think I can plug them both in the same weeks potentially. In the flex and stuff like that. I think that might be the only downfall is if, I use my 4-5 on one player essentially. But I think I can get a lot more out of both of them for the whole entire season.
Yeah. I think that's a great strategy. You already have Barkley as your RB1. So really and then in PPR, most of the time you're going to roll a receiver in your flex, and while you could roll both Taylor and Ingram at some point, because Ingram, while he's not a prolific pass catcher. He has that skill. So if Jackson shifts that way a little bit, but regardless, you're literally looking at Taylor and Ingram and spending 2 picks on just needing to piecemeal that position in that second RB position. And I think those numbers together are fringe RB1 numbers. I think that's a great move. And again, something to keep in mind as you're talking redraft leagues, right? So I like it, man. All right. Well, Ingram was definitely somebody that I was looking at here. Singletary came off the board too. So I'm sitting in round 5. I have no running backs. I have 3 wide receivers that I think are auto starts every single week. I took the shot on Zach Ertz, and most of my running back targets didn't get back to me. But I think at this point, I'm looking more to swing towards the fences. The receivers that are still on the board here in round 5, there's still guys I like. Tyler Lockett is somebody that I think is being undervalued a little bit. Metcalf went ahead of him in this draft. I think for redraft leagues, Lockett's still your guy there. Terry McLaurin is somebody that, obviously flashed a lot last year, but has quarterback concerns. If I had, DJ Chark is somebody that I think is going to be on a team that's going to throw the ball a lot, and he's going to be the target leader there. But I do think that I've got to take a running back here just because I'm getting to the point where I got a long turn. And there's a few teams behind me still that only have 1 running back. There's actually 4 teams that only have 1 running back. So chances are I'm going to be looking way down the list if I give it another kick. So there are 2 guys I'm looking at are Raheem Mostert, which of course the news came out from everywhere, including fake accounts that said it didn't happen, which was hilarious. Thank you, Twitter. But Mostert is in a position where if he is in San Fran and does not apparently get the trade that he wants, is that team runs the ball a ton. They ran the ball the second most attempts in the NFL last year, to Baltimore, but obviously they have Lamar running it 120 times a season. So with Breda being moved and hopefully being just one less mouth to feed, we'll see more of what we saw down the stretch with Mostert being the lead dog. Coleman is still going to be heavily involved, I think, but as long as it's just 2 guys, I feel pretty good about that. But what's the chances of him maybe being moved from San Francisco? That at this point is the concern. The other guy swinging at the fences here a little bit, I still really like Cam Akers in redraft. For redraft leagues, he would actually be my rookie RB1. I think his path to touches is a little bit more clear. I think he can give you a little bit more early returns. They had almost 20 rushing touchdowns on that team combined last season, and Todd Gurley's clearly gone. And we're just looking at Darrell Henderson. Are they really going to use Malcolm Brown? I think Akers, could carve himself out a pretty nice role there early on. So I'm going to take Mostert though, even with a question mark. So if anyone sees a screenshot of this draft and they think I'm nuts because of Twitter rumors, then so be it. But I think Mostert's a guy that just has the most upside. So I got a lot of running backs still that be added to my team. We'll see how this one plays out.
I'm not against the Mostert pick. I feel like he's going to just get a contract restructured, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he really just doesn't want to be paid $3 million this year. Like that's how much he's making. And he wants to be making money, coinciding with at least, what he did last year and the fact that he's, I think he could be their workhorse back if San Francisco let him.
Mm-hmm.
So I get it. And given that he's like 28 years old, he's not really going to have another opportunity to make money. Go after that money, get that money, Raheem, and hopefully just stay on the Niners, because I don't really see another backfield that he could get traded to that would make his value better or even kind of stay the same. So I like the pick. Given I think that you could have waited a little bit more, maybe not against the computer.
Yeah,
but I feel like in an actual redraft, Mostert in the 5th is not something that a lot of people are in about. But no, I'm not totally against it. And I think we're still in mid-July. So there's a lot of opportunity for him to get something worked out and be on the field for the Niners in September. So
yeah. Yep. So we'll see how that one plays out. It would look really good if he just stuck, but we'll see how. And so a lot of the three, in my opinion, the 3 running backs that were definitely at the top of the board behind Mostert, Akers. I really like. I like taking the shot on Swift if we're kind of swinging for it a little bit. And Kareem Hunt is somebody that I think is going to have some really nice standalone value in PPR leagues. I think if you're talking, non-PPR, then that story changes. But from what we saw last year too, man, they just used him so much in the passing game. He's going to find his way onto the field. So I'm sitting here. I only have one running back. We're in round 6, kind of towards the end. I already have my tight end locked up. There's some running backs that I like. Nobody that I really love in this spot. We got guys for me. Breda is somebody that it's still too early, but I think he might have the track to lead that backfield in touches over Jordan Howard. You have some other guys that I think are more middle round guys, like Coleman is undervalued, J.K. Dobbins, those kind of guys. There's just nobody that I really love here at the top, at least if it goes this way. Ronald Jones is somehow at the I sorted by projected points. Not going to choose Ronald Jones. Sorry. But I'm just going to go ahead with another wide receiver that I really like for this season. I already have 3 of them, but again, there's just nobody at the running back position I truly love. A guy that I think is going to be a great value. He's sitting here right here in the back of round 6. I think he has a path to wide receiver 1 targets, and that's Brandon Cooks. He's somebody that, they have 150 plus targets to fill. Plus Will Fuller will play 3 games a year. So I think Cooks is somebody that, while he's had the concussions, he hasn't really missed much time, and he had a really down year last year, but in this offense now in Houston, he's going to be my guy.
I honestly, I thought you were about to take Jarvis Landry. Because I saw Landry and I'm like, man, I really want Landry here. I think he'd be a steal at the end of the 6th. And then you started talking, and then you said path to wide receiver 1 target. I was like, wait, he might take Brandon Cooks. I still love Cooks, though. To be honest, I would have taken Cooks if you took Landry, because I do agree with you on everything there. Like whoever fills in for the Hopkins role for Deshaun Watson is going to be insanely valuable. And the fact that you can kind of take your shot on basically Cooks and Will Fuller late in rounds because of how late they're both going, like you could realistically grab both and then just kind of see who ends up being the guy, because we know what Will Fuller is. Like he has that rapport with Deshaun Watson, but he's also insanely injury prone, at least for his first few years in his career.
Right.
And then Cooks, while also kind of found himself to be a little injury prone with those concussions, is also a really good wide receiver, and up until last year was like top 15 for the first 4 years of his career as well too. So there's a lot of opportunity here in this Texans offense, and I think grabbing Cooks this late, and then maybe if Will Fuller is still there as well too, grabbing him too. Like, I mean, you just take your shot on which one of them is the wide receiver 1. And I mean, they both can be valuable as well too. We saw, we've seen games where Hopkins and Will Fuller both go off simultaneously. So if Cooks kind of slots in, Will Fuller's still there, they could have, big games together.
And how lucky is Brandon Cooks? It's so funny. You never really hear anything about him, but the guy moves around like he's like a traveling circus. Like he's all over the place. Every year it seems like he's on a new team. He's played with Drew Brees, Tom Brady, and a Sean McVay quarterback. I mean, this guy just can't lose. And then he goes and now he's with Deshaun Watson. Like, are you kidding me? So I don't know what the deal is, why nobody wants him for more than 2 years at a time. But I'll take Cooks being in a room with a ton of available workload.
Allen Robinson's over there, watching Cooks move around with all these quarterbacks. He's like, what do I got to do?
No doubt.
Yep. So this is an interesting point here because we're getting in the 6th, 7th round. I think if I hadn't taken George Kittle, this was kind of be where I would be looking for tight ends. I really like Evan Ingram this year. If he can stay healthy, he's going to be a top 5 tight end. And he's not being drafted as such. He's being drafted with that injury prone label added to, which I still think is fair. Hayden Hurst is another guy I really like too. Has a lot of opportunity in Atlanta without Austin Hooper. Tyler Higbee, same thing. I think, I think the Rams saw their path to success last year at the end of the year when they went to a lot of 12 personnel. And I think Higbee is going to be a big beneficiary of staying with that 12 personnel. And again, he's being drafted with the thought that they might not do that, and he might have just been like a flash in the pan kind of thing. But man, if he's not, he was on pace for like 1,600 yards last year. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but like, was ridiculous.
Yep. And he still gets the Cardinals twice a year too, so you can't go wrong with that either.
Exactly. Quarterbacks are also interesting here too. We saw a couple of them being taken off between your 2 picks here, between Dak, Kyler, and Russ. It's still too early for me. But I just like to keep an eye on it and to tell the viewers out there what's going on here, at least in terms of quarterbacks, because Watson is still there. Breeze, Matt Ryan, Brady, all these guys here who I still think it's a little too early. We're still building out our core here in the end of the 6th, moving into the 7th. So my pick here, like I said, I was hoping that you weren't going to take him. It's going to be Jarvis Landry, who's I think for me is going to be a solid wide receiver 2. Opposite of Kenny Golladay. I think I built up a lot of upside and now I need a little bit of that floor. And Landry is like perennially underrated. And even though I know he's coming in with like that injury that he had surgery on, that a lot of people are kind of like, man, he might not be ready for the start of the year, but I still think, Landry is like a dog. Like we saw him, it was on, was it Hard Knocks when he was talking about like, you got to play through injuries, like that. Saying that there's not enough fire in that wide receiver room. Like I think Landry's going to do everything he can to get out there. And if he is, Baker loves him. He's going to be targeted, and I think he just offers a PPR floor that can match and go very nicely with Kenny Golladay as well as Saquon and my 2 RB2s there. So I really like that pick here in the 6th round as my wide receiver 2. And then my next pick here, with JK and Parker going, is going to be a little tougher. I really would have wished that Darius Geis would have made it because I think he's going to be a late round dart throw guy or like a mid round guy who has a lot of potential and a lot of upside if he stays healthy. And so, man, I really don't like any of these running backs. They're really gross.
On Landry for sure. I think you're spot on. Like I would, if there's definitely no issue taking him there. I think his price tag is such that it does build in a little bit if he's not ready to go. But if he is, man, like that is a fantastic value there. Like I would, I'm probably, if he's healthy, I'm definitely taking him over some of the guys that went ahead of him. Even with this little injury concern, I'm still taking him over like Marquise Brown. I know he's a hot name, but I mean, it's PPR volume, man. And then AJ Green is another receiver that came off the board almost a full, at the beginning of that round. Landry, I think is a great value there. So fingers crossed, obviously, that he's there to start the season. But one other thing before you make your pick that it's good to remember is like if Landry say he isn't out there the first 2 to 3 weeks, one strategy or one thing that I like to remind people too, and especially in redraft leagues, is the bye weeks don't start kicking in until week 4 or 5. So like you have a full roster for those first couple weeks. So if you have a guy that is not going to be out there for the first a week or 2 at the beginning of the season, much easier to fill that spot as opposed to like obviously when it happens mid-year. Is that now you're dealing with bye weeks and other injuries on your roster and things like that. So hopefully you'll be going into it a little bit more cleaner roster, healthy roster, and not having to worry about bye weeks yet. So your depth is available for all of it. So that's something else that you just need to consider if a guy's going to be out for a week or 2.
That's a good point. I like that a lot. So do I?
I tried to buy you some time there, but
yeah, I know. I appreciate it.
No, you're good, dude.
You know what? I'm going to take. I think he's not. Oh, I didn't mean to click on the name. I meant to click draft. He's not a sexy name. He's not. Especially like I said, we're trying to separate ourselves from the dynasty mindset, right? And I think Boyd is kind of starting to slip in dynasty drafts just because they drafted T. Higgins. There's AJ Green is coming back, right? But I think Boyd has a lot of potential just being that surefire guy for Joe Burrow, and I mean, kind of a safety blanket. And even if AJ Green doesn't stay healthy again, I think there's a very good chance that might happen as well too. Boyd now steps in as that wide receiver 1 again. So again, just looking for kind of a PPR floor, kind of in the same vein as my Jarvis Landry pick. I really like Tyler Boyd there. My other thoughts were Edelman and Michael Gallup, kind of in that same player mold. Edelman is going to be really nice. Hopefully he gets Cam for 16 games. I think that's what they're going to want to do. But if he does, I think he'll be a really good target as well too late here. And I think Gallup, a lot of people are really down on him because of that CeeDee Lamb pick. But again, he's like their surefire wide receiver too. And I think Lamb slots in more into the slot. And that team's just going to be really explosive anyway. And Gallup is going to get targeted. There's still a lot of vacated targets there between Cobb and Jason Witten. And I think those 3 wide receivers, Cooper, Gallup, and Lamb, can all have a bunch of opportunities. So I like Gallup this late as well too. And we saw what he could do last year. Basically, like matched Amari Cooper in terms of season-long production. So those are at least the 3 guys that I was looking at there.
Boyd is a great pick. I think he's somebody that's being overlooked. I think that, I like Higgins. I have him in a lot of spots, but Boyd, especially for this year, but even in Dynasty, I'm still scooping him up, man. I just don't know how much longer AJ Green is going to be relevant. And I'm with you on Gallup. As a Cowboys fan, I at first was I was so pumped that they drafted CeeDee Lamb because it was totally the right thing to do. And then for the fantasy side of me was like, damn it. Like, another mouth to feed, but you're right. After I looked at it, I think he might actually have one of the best opportunities as a rookie coming in there with, like you said, 160 targets vacated from Cobb and Witten. Jarwin will get his, but the best thing about it is when you're talking about whether it's Lamb's immediate value or Gallup, which I still really like, Cooper doesn't demand 150 targets. He gets it done on $120, so they're going to throw the ball a ton there. I think Gallup would have been a nice pick there as well, but I would have given the edge to Tyler Boyd because I do think it's a little clearer path. I'm sitting here in round 7. My only running back is Raheem Mostert. The quarterbacks are, obviously, man, Watson is great, but just keep in mind, it's going to be a great pick here. I'm definitely taking Deshaun Watson over any other player I would take right now, just heads up. But when I get down into round 10 or 11 or 12 or whatever, there's going to be so much better talent there compared to other positions as well. So I'm just going to have to start hammering home the running backs probably here. There are some wide receiver names I like, but I'm going to go with the name I mentioned kind of last time around. I thought he would make it back, and that's Matt Breida. He's not going to be my every week RB2, but I do think he's going to be the back that sees the most work there. It's really just him and Jordan Howard, and we know what Jordan Howard is. Miami will still be in a position, I think, where game script will help Breida out, and he's super explosive, right? So don't ever watch a game that Matt Breida is in because the guy gets injured. I think he's contractually obligated to go down on the field every 5 minutes, but somehow he always keeps playing, so keep that in mind.
I like it. Matt Breida's been a guy that I actually drafted him in Scott Fishbowl. So I'm happy about that.
So late, right?
Dude, it was like 11th round or something.
I couldn't believe he was sitting there. It was crazy. I ended up with him there too. My team is it ends up being I won't dive into it the whole thing, but just the idea again, what we talked about, just scooping up the guys that dynasty players don't like. And I was like, I'm okay with that. I'm good. So
Breida's a guy that I like a lot because, I listen to JJ Zacharyason's podcast, Late Round QB. It's fantastic. If anybody's not listening to that, what are you doing? But he had an episode where he talked about finding those breakout running backs, right? And, a couple of the things that he mentioned was that they come from kind of muddy running back groups where there's no clear RB1. And they're the guy who gets the receptions from that team, right? So, I mean, a lot of people, myself included, have Jordan Howard as that team's RB1, right? But I mean, Breida, is super explosive. He's going to be the guy catching passes, and I think that, you know, in a kind of much lighter version of Chubb and Kareem Hunt, this is kind of a similar backfield dynamic, I think, to what a lot of people expect from Chubb and Hunt, where it's going to be Howard for 2 downs, and then Braid is out there as well too, catching passes. And by the end of the year in PPR format, their fantasy points might be very, very similar just because of the reception value that Braid is getting over, you know, Jordan Howard's 200 plus carries. So I like that pick a lot. And for the upside that Brady gives you, I mean, he runs like a 4.35, can take anything to the house on any given play. So I like it a lot.
Yeah, I think he's going to be an undervalued guy this season. So it's going to be a nice mid-round pick for teams like this that's structured where you go heavy wide receiver. Few things as we long term before I got back to my pick here. A couple QBs went off the board: Watson, Breeze, Matt Ryan, Evan Ingram went round 7. I think if you're gonna go for a mid-round tight end, I think that's a fine target there. This mock drafted Gronk even before him, which is there. It only takes one person in your league. So Higbee is still sitting here. So just like for reference in round 8, I still think that he's a really solid pick. Hunter Henry, even with the question marks, I think in round 8, if you were waiting on the tight end position, I think there's enough guys here that you know, you can really fill it out here in the later rounds before you get to the double digits. So for my team, again, I have the 2 running backs, Mostert and Breida. Nobody here's a slam dunk, but I'm just going to keep throwing darts, which is what you have to do when you start off with 3 straight wide receivers. That's going to be super strong. My flex is pretty much going to be filled every week with DJ Moore, and I still have Brandon Cooks there. Fuller's on the board. So if I wanted to just pair him up, I totally could. So if you're talking about a round 6 and round 8 pick to lock down, you know, the best available options, I think in that Houston offense, you could definitely go that route. And if Cooks was my wide receiver 3, I might consider that, just because, again, I think it's clear that it's going to be one or the other and potentially both. But for here, I'm just going to take another running back and a guy that I think is the safest floor of any of the running backs left. There's a lot of just running down back guys that aren't going to see a ton of targets, but there's one guy that is going to be at least 90 plus targets in the bag, and that's Tariq Cohen. His receptions are unquestioned, in my opinion, based on the fact they didn't add anybody else that running back room. David Montgomery is going to see a ton of carries, but with it being full PPR, Cohen is still somebody that should give you low end RB2 numbers.
Yeah, I'm with it. And I mean, the only other running back that I'm looking at right now is actually the guy that I am going to take with this pick. I mean, I'm staring down Sony Michel. And like,
while one does in a PPR league, that's like,
yeah,
who blinks?
Like,
yeah,
man, that I get the Sony, but like, it's kind of, I see him similar to how David Montgomery was last year, right? Like, yeah, he was the RB24. Speaking about Montgomery was the RB24 last year in PPR formats. But that was primarily because he played 16 games and he scored like 11 points every game. So that was literally just enough to get it done. You know, for out an entire season with other injuries to other players ahead of him and stuff, but like, he really didn't help you on a weekly basis. And so because there's no PPR upside to Sony Michel, I'm not really about that. Now, what I am about here, and we're in the 8th round, and it might be a little early, but man, I really am intrigued by Alexander Mattison this year and the upside potential that he offers. One, if Dalvin Cook actually does hold out, you know, like we saw with Austin Eckler last year. But then 2, you know, Cook is, I don't want to say he's injury prone, but man, he has not shown that he could stay healthy for a full 16 games in any of the 3 seasons. Like last season was the longest he stayed healthy in an entire season, at 13, 14 games. But we saw when Madison came in what he can do. And in that offense still, Madison is going to be the guy. Like, it's not going to be Mike Boone splitting time with him. You know, it's going to be Cook. And when it's not Cook, it's going to be Madison. And then that is what is going on here. So a high value handcuff here, who I think also has standalone value in some weeks. I think that you could do a lot worse than Alexander Mattison there at the end of the 8th round as my RB. 4.
It's 4.
Yeah. I don't know why it says 3 for me, but yeah, he's my 4.
It might have plugged one into the flex.
Oh, that's what happened. Yep. They plugged in Taylor at the flex.
Yeah. That gets me every time.
Ingram. RB4 anyway. So and then real quick, I'm going to make my next pick here, and I'm actually going to dip into the quarterback pool. It's late round guys, but I really like what Josh Allen has going for him this year. If you look at in terms of quarterback streaming, right? Josh Allen week 1 gets the Bills, and then week 2 gets the Dolphins. He adds the rushing upside as well, and he's gotten better over the last 2 seasons, from his rookie year to the last year in terms of passing. Like the efficiency is not really there and completion percentage, but like now you add in on top of the weapons that he got last year that made him better. Now he gets Stephon Diggs on top of that as well too. I think there's a lot of potential for Josh Allen to kind of boom in these first couple of weeks and kind of be a difference maker for me and this starting lineup. Instead of adding depth pieces, I can really look for a guy like Josh Allen who has the potential to score 25 plus fantasy points in the first 2 weeks and then kind of go from there after that. And the investment still, I still consider this late round quarterback, considering that I got him at like quarterback, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, QB 8. That's pretty solid value for me. And he was a QB 6 last year. So just ADP versus rank wise, it's a value there too. So I don't know how you feel about either of those 2 picks.
Yeah, Madison is for sure going to be the most sought after, like more true handcuff. Based off of some of the things like we've heard, like Cook obviously wants a new deal, as all running backs should strive to get that money as quick as they can, because it's just the system is not set up for success for them, unfortunately, with the way rookie contracts work. But like you said, I think that if there's ever an opportunity for any reason that Madison gets the chance to be the go-to guy for the Vikings, they're going to continue to run the ball a ton. This is what Zimmerman wants to do. So I think that it's high upside for that. You just have to commit to keeping him on your roster all year. So that's usually why I try to wait a little bit longer. But if you feel super confident about your team, then I definitely don't mind taking him that early. The only thing I guess that I would have maybe the reason I wouldn't have drafted Madison there is just because with you having Jonathan Taylor, and again paired with Ingram, you should be pretty solid there. But with Taylor and Landry, there's some question marks, I think, about what you might be getting right out of the gate. But again, as somebody that's plugged in, you're going to be able to fill out your team here with some options that you can, plug and play if for some reason those guys aren't startable with confidence that first couple weeks. So Allen for sure, though, he's my QB7. He's in a tier right with that second tier of guys for me. I think that he continues to put up big numbers. Like you said, adding Stephon Diggs doesn't hurt, right? So right. I really like the pick there. And he was the tier break for me at quarterback. So if I was to go QB there, that definitely would have been the pick. Nice. I'm sitting here now. Another quarterback went off the board. So I wasn't looking. Allen might have been somebody that I considered based off, again, having a tier break there. But man, looking at this, there's one wide receiver that I still really like, but I think I can kick the can one more time around. That's Jamison Crowder. I think in this format, he's just going to be he was so heavily targeted last year when he's paired up with Darnold. It's insane value if you can get him in round 10. So I'm gonna see if it makes its way around to me. I'm gonna take another running back dart throw here. We're sitting, was this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rounds later. After Melvin Gordon goes off the board, I'm gonna take Phillip Lindsay. I still think he's somebody that's gonna see touches in that offense. Like I said, I do think Gordon is gonna make his way into being the primary pass catcher, but Lindsay still is young enough that he could prove that skill and somebody that they could still keep involved there. So again, at this point, because I'm so loaded at the wide receiver position, in my opinion, I don't want to necessarily keep forgetting running back. I'm just going to keep throwing those darts, I guess. So, and did he go? Doesn't look like it. Jamison Crowder is still sitting there. I just talked about him. I think that of all the receivers that are still on the board, in my opinion, far and away the best value at this spot. In PPR, he's going to continue to be heavily targeted. I like Denzel Mims' opportunity, but it's literally Denzel Mims, the rook, coming in all this in this current landscape that we're in as far as rookies not getting much time with the team. And Brashard Perriman, who, despite the fact that he looks 87 years old, is still only been in the league for 4 years, and this is like his 8th team. I mean, come on, we're done. Jamison Crowder. That's what you should be looking in the double-digit rounds in PPR. So I love it, man. I feel like I'm that should be my last wide receiver, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll take the rest of the wide receivers here.
There you go.
I like both of those picks, to be honest with you. Philip Lindsay, not a guy who got, kind of taken over by a rookie, but it was Melvin Gordon. But again, still kind of in that same vein where he's a high priority handcuff should something happen to Gordon, but also has standalone value, like you said, with the receiving upside as well too. Is also like a really good runner and really efficient inside the red zone too. Like he puts a lot of drives away in the end zone. So I like that pick a lot too, and I think he would be one of the guys that I would consider there as well too. Like Latavius Murray would have been another one, and then Chase Edmonds here would have been like these priority handcuffs that I'm really about, who also can have standalone value too. So and then Crowder, I'm all in on Crowder. He's another guy, and actually the guy that I'm going to take here. I've been debating a lot between Jameson Crowder and then Sterling Shepard in a lot of these late rounds, and I really like Sterling Shepard a lot because he's like an 8 target per game guy. I don't know if people realize that, but he averaged over 8 targets per game last year. It's again just injuries, and similar to Evan Ingram, if Sterling Shepard stays healthy, he's going to be a solid wide receiver 1 for the New York Giants, and I think even with Golden Tate as well there too, they all can be, they all can work together, and that offense can be very, very, very prolific with Daniel Jones too. And I think Sterling Shepard is just another safety floor kind of guy who offers a lot of PPR floor, similar to Landry and Boyd, but I'm getting him at an injury discount here at the end of the 10th round. So that's really what I like. And I debate between him and Jamison Crowder a lot because I think both those guys are kind of in the same mold and they're going to offer the same kind of things here in the 10th round. So I like them both.
I think Shepard, you could definitely give him the nod just from the standpoint of I would like to buy into the Giants offense. Like as a whole, I'm buying into the Giants offense a hell of a lot more than I'm buying into the Jets offense. The only reason I'd give Crowder just the slight advantage is just because, like I said, I think that there's just less talent around him. But I do think anytime you can take a flyer in a double-digit round in that Giants offense, it's a good risk to take, man, because they're going to have to be throwing the ball a ton, and Shepard's definitely proven,
Yeah. And then this next one here, I don't see him. Is he buried? There's no way. Oh, he's behind my microphone. I can't see him. Tony Pollard. There he is. Okay, yep. So Tony Pollard, I'll add him in with the Latavius Murray, Chase Edmonds priority handcuffs. I didn't see him because he's literally behind my microphone right here. It's like perfect line of sight. Then the next guy I'm going to take here, I guess he's going to be my RB5, is actually going to be Duke Johnson. I really like him a lot, and I think that he offers a lot of the PPR upside, obviously in terms of just being the pass catching running back for the Houston Texans, even though I think DJ excels at that. The other DJ, David Johnson, excels at that a lot as well too. But I think Duke's gonna carve himself a nice little role here. And I think with all those vacated targets and, should anything happen to like Will Fuller or Brandon Cooks, like that offense could be very depleted at the wide receiver position very quickly. And I think that's going to potentially cause Duke and David Johnson to be out there kind of at the same time. And I think it could be a lot and very similar to, the Eagles last year where Boston Scott and Duke Johnson both thrived when they didn't really have any other wide receivers. Like it was Greg Ward and the tight ends. And then it was, just kind of taking those running backs out of the backfield all the time. So I think Duke can be that kind of guy. And also, we haven't seen David Johnson really stay healthy for the past couple of years. So with no one else really behind them, it could be Duke Johnson sliding into, maybe not a workhorse role. I don't know if Bill O'Brien would let Duke be a workhorse, but the upside is there should David Johnson go down. So I like that a lot as my RB5 here and in the top of the 11th round.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The value at this spot is great. I wish that, if say David Johnson comes back and he's, at least somewhat 80% of the player that we once knew. The only difficult thing is David Johnson has been such a good pass catcher over his career that I hate the fact that he has that skill set, and it's what Duke excels in. But you also have to factor in, like you said, that DJ has, when he's been out there, in the second half of last year, did not look like the same player. But I still think there's enough touches to go around where at this spot it's worth that look, because I think at worst you still have somebody that's going to get you, potentially around 60 targets in that offense. And at best, you have a guy that is in line for a ton of workload if DJ goes down, because how much more can the Texans spend on the running back position?
Right.
Like it's insane. So I'm sitting here. We got 3 picks left. So we're in round 11. I love my wide receivers at this spot, but again, just my running backs: Mostert, Breda, Tariq Cohen, Phillip Lindsay. I'm gonna take one more stab. Again, this guy could be nothing, but he's in an offense that I think does have some opportunities. I mentioned it earlier that Cam Akers is my favorite rookie running back just for redraft leagues this year, because I think out of the gate, he's somebody that's could produce for you right away. But Darrell Henderson is a guy that the Rams still spent draft capital on last year. They moved up to get this guy. And while he did struggle to find the field last year, there's just so much opportunity in this offense for the taking. And while I do think Cam Akers is the guy, here in round 11, with the way my team is structured, I'll take the shot on Darrell Henderson here, and hope that, if he can work his way into, 50% of those touches, man, I think that's a decent value there. So I was hoping for Duke, to be honest with you. But I'm okay with Darrell Henderson there, just kind of adding it to my dart throws.
Nice. No, I like it too, because we really don't know how that backfield is going to shake out, right? Like Darrell Henderson was their second round pick last year, and they didn't have it first, so he was technically their first pick. Right. Cam Akers just adds on to that. So, and a lot of people really loved Darrell Henderson coming out of Memphis last year. And I know I talk about, and I had him on a video for DLF, David Wilsey, his running back model for Dynasty and stuff, but it's an awesome model, and that model really liked Darrell Henderson a lot. And so just to see him around all the other names, like he's in there with like DeAndre Swift from this year, but then also, Royce Freeman is in there, who again didn't really pan out, but was also a really cool prospect. Reggie Bush is in there, like around Darrell Henderson, and then you look a couple names above, you start getting into the Zekes and the Saquons and the Jonathan Taylors and stuff. So like he's in like that top 10 to 12 in David's model. So and just it's weird to for him to not really have some sort of an opportunity.
Yeah, and absolutely. And like you said, the fact that they did spend the pick on him when they didn't even have a first, it felt like maybe a luxury pick at the time, but now that when they cut bait, so quickly on Gurley, I just feel like that, and especially in one of the themes, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier too, just these rookies not getting time with the team, I think is going to really impact their early season success. So if I see a situation where I think that there's a question of the rookie taking over, I still think that the incumbent, veteran is still going to have an edge out of the gate, and it might take a little bit of time there. So, talent will win out eventually. I think when we talked about with Taylor, he's just such a beast. But I do think if you're looking for some Band-Aid solutions or some dart throws at this late in the round, just look for those types of opportunities where somebody that has already had the benefit of being on the team and the coaching staff is intact. I mean, he should know by now. So if he doesn't get it now, he's probably never going to get it. But I'll take the shot around 11. Round 12, I'm on the clock here. I'm looking at again, a great thing to keep in mind, and you kind of mentioned it too, keeping an eye on what the teams are behind you at this spot. I haven't taken a quarterback yet in round 12. I'm looking at the teams behind me. The team directly behind me has already taken 2 quarterbacks. And then there's another team, and yourself only has 1, and there's another team with 2 QBs. If there's enough guys you like, obviously you can just kick it knowing that maybe 1 or 2 goes off the board there, and you can just pick them up in your last round, paying attention to the corners if you're close enough, that type of thing. Definitely something I do with every draft is keep track of the quarterbacks and the tight ends for the teams around me, knowing when you're able to maybe go another round on a guy. But for me, I'm not even there's no reason to really risk it even at all, because the guy that I really like is Jared Goff. He's going to throw it 630 times at least. They definitely kind of changed the offense up a little bit, but with the guys that are still left in this, again, second to last round of the draft, I'm not taking Baker Mayfield when a couple picks before him. That's great and all. Baker's probably, he could develop into a better quarterback than Jared Goff, but if we're talking 2020, this is an offense that's going to need to pass the ball a ton. And I think Jared Goff does that again. His touchdown numbers last year were so incredibly low for the amount of passes that he threw. So I think that'll come back to life a little bit there for Goff.
I like the Goff pick a lot too. He was like, man, I wish I got him as Scott Fish. He was like, he slid so hard in so many drafts, and I think he got taken like 3 picks in front of me, in mine. But I love Goff because I think he has the opportunity to lead the NFL in pass attempts. The touchdown regression is going to come up drastically. Like he went from being really efficient in 2018 to like 3% touchdown percentage last year.
That's crazy, right? Like it was nuts.
The swing is insane. And I think, again, like I said, that 12 personnel that they figured out at the end of last year, I think they carried that over. And that Goff was really great at the end of the stretch, like after week 10 on, when Higbee exploded. Robert Woods was going off. Cooper Kupp wasn't really involved, but he was splitting time with Brandon Cooks, who's no longer there. So, Kupp, Woods, and Higbee, get Gerald Everett back, add in Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson out of the backfield. Like, that's still a very explosive team, and Goff can get it done with Sean McVay. We've seen it before. And another thing that I really like to do, especially whenever you get into these late round quarterbacks, right? You're not really investing much, so they're easy to drop. So then that it makes it really easy to, if they don't pan out to be like this year's Pat Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or whatever, that you start streaming. And Jared Goff, week 1, gets your Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football, which
that's
I think
boat race waiting to happen right there. Oh man,
that is going to be, and it's in LA as well too. So gets a bad defense at home, Sunday Night Football. It should be overall just a really high-powered offensive, explosive game, and I think Goff was going to have a really good opportunity week 1 to put up some big numbers. So I like it a lot.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, that's something that I didn't consider at that pick was the early season schedule. But again, to what we talked about at the top, flipping the mindset. With Josh Allen is a fantastic point. His first 2 matchups, the first 2 weeks. Now, Allen, you're a little bit more invested in. Like, we might write it out a little bit more, but regardless, like. Those early season matchups are something that you would pretty much almost never consider in a dynasty format, unless you're, buying assets to, for just this year, maybe take a look at it. But it's something that even gets lost in redraft. People don't look at those types of things. So you nailed it. I think that's awesome. So it makes my pick look even better. So I really appreciate you brought it up. but dude, honestly, I think something that dynasty owners might not consider is in redraft leagues is to take a look at those schedules, because especially when you're talking about quarterback, tight end, what their early season looks like.
Yeah. So with 2 picks left here, I like my overall team build. I'm not chasing a backup quarterback, not chasing a backup tight end, because both those positions are really solidified. So I'm just going to continue to take these dart throws on guys that I really like here. And I mean, I have 5 running backs, which I like a lot. And there's, not a lot of guys that I think would be worth just like stashing to see what would happen, just because we have a very limited bench spot. Like Joshua Kelly, again, separating from Dynasty, Kelly's a great stash, but in redraft, he's not going to be useful unless Austin Eckler goes down. I mean, he might end up being some sort of Melvin Gordon role. But I want to see it first before I actually go for it. And a lot of these other guys are primary handcuffs, backups, not really going to do much, even if they do get an opportunity that I'm not really into. So we're back at the wide receiver position. And as I was scrolling through here, the one guy that I like a lot is I'm actually going to double up on this Giants offense here. And I'm going to take Golden Tate because, like I said, like if Sterling Shepard can stay healthy, he'll be great. But again, if he stays healthy, he and Evan Ingram both have had injury problems before, and Golden Tate, I think, could be a really good piece in this offense. We saw it last year without Sterling Shepard, without Evan Ingram, whenever it was the Darius Slayton show with Golden Tate. But Tate had a few good games as well, too. And I know I heard Mike Wright was hyping him up on a couple episodes of the Ballers beforehand. So I love to see that. So I'll take the double dipping on the Giants offense, because I think it could be really prolific. And if injuries do happen, I can kind of piecemeal that wide receiver 1 together, I think, between Tate and Sterling Shepard. And then the last guy here, my last dart throw, screw you, Sammy Watkins, or Preston Williams.
Oh, man.
I love it.
You can see my cue? That was weird.
Sorry. No.
No, you're good.
Love Preston Williams. Love. So, he was the target guy at the beginning of the year, and then it took his injury for Devontae Parker to basically break out. So I think Preston Williams can come in and be, that wide receiver, and for Tua as well too. Like I think I think he can be an explosive wide receiver 1 for the Dolphins and be a flex guy and a bye week fill in for me. And, because he tore his ACL last year, if he doesn't really work out through the first few weeks, I can just use an easy cut for me for somebody else for a priority waiver wire ad, or one of these handcuffs. Should something happen, like if Derrick Henry goes down, holy crap, Darrington Evans, like priority ad, just drop Preston Williams for Darrington Evans. Easy to do.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind as well, like especially like in that, again, you wouldn't probably think about this too often in a dynasty type format, but like in a redraft format, every league know your rules. But in a redraft format, if you have an IR spot, is that I always kind of try to target guys like Preston Williams or somebody that I know that I can just quickly plug right into that spot and then just add another guy, because that position, that's the first drop anyway when waivers come week 1. So like, if you had an IR spot in your league, like Williams would definitely be somebody that I would, that I would target. That's what I was looking at here as well. So I like the pick with Williams. I was actually looking at Tate and Williams potentially in this final round. But for that, I'm going to take one more running back dart throw. Is actually a guy that you just mentioned. I think Darrington Evans is somebody that, he's probably more of a handcuff. If Henry went down, obviously he's man, it's all there for him. But when you look at what this offense did 2 years ago, again, I mean, a little bit different coaching situation, but Deion Lewis was a little bit more involved, compared to last year. So if they do make that switch and right out of the gate, not drafting this guy to start him through the first couple of weeks, if he's actually seeing some targets, because we know they're not going to Derrick Henry, that is those opportunities in that offense would probably go to somebody else. Evans could work his way into, potentially a PPR flex bye week type guy. So he's, it's the last player. It's your first cut more than likely when waivers are on that first week. So he was just another guy that, again, I think that there's an opportunity there when you look at that offense for, the pass catching running back job is definitely up for grabs. It just depends on whether they use it as much as last year, so it's almost useless, or like they did maybe 2 years ago where Lewis was seeing some looks.
Yeah. And especially depending on how deep your rosters are, right? Like if you get into leagues where you have maybe 6 or 7 bench spots, and you're kind of in these late round and you're looking for guys who you should just draft, and instead of just being like, whatever, just give me like this guy, try to prioritize, or at least this is what I try to do, is I try to prioritize guys who, should something happen, they are priority waiver wire ads, and people, if you're playing in a fab league, people are going to blow a big chunk of their fab to get that guy. And to save you that money, you just draft him at the end and just stash him and wait to see what happens. And that's something that I like to do a lot with Scott Fishbowl, because that's 22-man rosters. You get really, really deep in there too. And so if you can kind of find guys who, if something happens, they're a priority waiver wire ad, and you could, you just already have them, then you saved yourself a lot of money that you would have used to get him anyway. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you have him now. So yeah, you can do whatever you want with him. You can trade him, you could start him, you can do whatever with it. So I like that. Darrington Evans is a guy that I think fits that mold really, really well at the end here. I think Antonio Gibson's another one. Mm-hmm. And there's a few other guys, a lot of those priority handcuffs as well too. But I think basically it's a lot of running backs essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, and you mentioning that, like, that's actually something that I actually write an article in season each week and there's a few of these out there, but I've been doing this for a while, and it's just something that I really love doing. It's a strategy I think gives you an advantage in redraft leagues is looking ahead 1 week, utilizing a roster spot or two to stash those guys, like you said, to get ahead. Because if you guess right, I mean, man, you are sitting on a gold mine and you're ahead of everybody else. You saved yourself some fab, but looking ahead a little bit, like that's the kind of player you might want to look as far as like to a priority handcuff. There's no point of riding out with, Larry Fitzgerald on your roster, at the beginning of the year, because you're not going to play him anyway, unless you took an obviously injured guy maybe, and you need to plug and play like we talked about with that strategy. But if your roster's set, you have at least a month probably before you're really going to the wire or looking to your depth. You're playing your starters for the most part. So when you're sitting there in the last couple of rounds, yeah, just take the upsides, dart throws. And that's a great way to look at it. And again, something that in redraft you would prioritize more versus in a dynasty league where you're actually trying to build something out for the long term. So in this, you definitely have to go in with that mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So just to run down real quick, my roster: Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Kenny Golladay, Jarvis Landry, George Kittle, Mark Ingram, Tyler Boyd, Alexander Madison, Sterling Shepard, Duke Johnson, Golden Tate, and Preston Williams. So I like it. I really wish I would have been able to kind of double up on running backs at the beginning, but overall, nothing really that I would have changed. It's different because I've never really done anything where I could see what would happen if I went tight end early, like grabbing a Kittle, grabbing a Kelsey. You know, I found myself, because there's so many breakout guys this year where I could just like punt the position and say, you know what, I'll just see what happens with Gesicki, Jonnu Smith, Blake Jarwin, Hayden Hurst, you know, even Higbee and whatever. I could just grab those guys later. So I like it a lot with going George Kittle early. So overall, I like my roster. So do you have yours? Do you want me to run yours down?
Yeah, I got it in front of me. I can roll through it. So started 3 wide receivers, went Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin, DJ Moore in round 3, Zach Ertz in round 4, and then I had no running back. So Raheem Mostert, Brandon Cooks, Matt Breida in round 7, Tyreek Cohen, Philip Lindsay, and then double-digit rounds, round 10, took Jameson Crowder, Darrell Henderson, Jared Goff in round 12, and then Darrellton Evans in round 13. So yeah, man, overall it's you have to know that you're gonna take stabs at running backs. Usually if you go, I don't mind going wide receiver heavy whatsoever. It's a lot easier to do. Like, let's say, you know, I really like DJ Moore. So let's say if I would have gone Kamara at 5, knowing that, like, you know, I'm really set at wide receiver with Godwin and Moore. And let's say, because Wood was on the board in round 4. So like in this quick theoretical, I had Kamara and then Godwin, Moore, and Robert Woods, which I absolutely love. That's usually the strategy I like a little bit, would lean to a little bit more if I'm not going to just hammer running backs, because now I only have 1 running back spot to fill, as opposed into this scenario, the running backs just didn't fall to me. I didn't really like what was there. So now I'm kind of like, I have all these dart throws, which I think are okay. And I'm super stacked at wide receiver and I have a really solid tight end, but now I need to kind of piecemeal 2 running back slots. So, you know, I would say if you don't get trapped in the redraft strategy of like, I got to hammer, you know, I need 2. That's why I do like your team. Because you have Barkley. So now, you know, and when the Taylor Ingram combo is really solid too, you really only have that 1 running back slot. So I usually treat my second running back slot in PPR when I go that strategy as more as my flex, right? Where I'm so solid everywhere else. I'm just piecemealing my late round targets to fill in that RB2 slot.
Right. And that's actually something that I wanted to ask. If you could go back, would you have swapped Kamara for Thomas?
Yeah, I think if you could tell me like before we started, like, hey, I'm going to write in Robert Woods at 408, I'd be like, okay, perfect. And I definitely would have gone Kamara there because I love the value in Robert Woods. There are still some later round guys, like I don't, as my wide receiver 3, that I wouldn't mind. I mean, a whole round after that, like Chark and Lockett go off the board. Those are guys that I've been plugging into my wide receiver 3 in some mock drafts. So it's you know, Thomas is a beast. There's nothing wrong with taking him at 5. Like he was generally, you know, be that you know, in consideration there. But yeah, looking back on it, it'd probably would have made my life easier if I had Kamara at 5. But dude, I don't know if anyone can touch Thomas, Godwin, and more. Like that's super stacked. So you got to remember that when you're looking at your running backs, like, oof, this looks rough, but you know, you're got value in other places. So something to keep in mind as you're looking back at teams. But yeah, man, it's not for the faint of heart.
And you can always trade. Like if this was an actual league, you could try to trade away, you know, one of your people. Like you could trade away Michael Thomas for a couple guys potentially, or you know, make a 1-for-1 trade, do all that stuff too. So yeah, I'm not against, you know, just drafting for value and then just figuring it out later, especially because I mean we're drafting really early. A lot of redraft leagues aren't going to happen until August, but you know, this is the type of things that you just start thinking about and trying to figure out, you know, depending on where you are in the first round and where you're drafting from, and then depending on how the draft board falls your league overall, you know, there's just a lot of different moves that you can just, you know, just kind of be flexible in the draft and just go with what the drafts takes you. So I think that's what you did very well. I mean, like Thomas, Godwin, DJ Moore, and Zach Ertz, like, holy crap.
Yeah, so, especially in PPR, I feel really good about that.
Yeah. So Kyle, thank you so much, man, for joining me today and running through this. I mean, this is the first redraft one for this year. The first time I did this on Sleeper. First time I was in the draft with my guest as well too. So Thank you so much for being the guinea pig in so many different ways on this episode. It was really awesome, and I'm super appreciative of you hopping on. So why don't you tell all the people out there where they can find you, what you're doing, writing, podcasting, all that good stuff. Let the people out there know.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate the invite. This was a ton of fun. I love talking through these and hearing other people's opinions on players are. You can never do enough mock drafts, honestly, so to get in there, and especially like to hear other people's mindset when they're picking and things is definitely beneficial. So this was a ton of fun, man. Like you talked about earlier, had been doing the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast for about 4 years, man, 500 episodes of that, really grinding it out over the last few years. But my co-host Seth just decided that it was kind of time to take a step back from full-time podcasting. So with that, man, I still have a passion for this. I love podcasting. So I've been doing a show for the last month and a half called, I rebranded it to the Fantasy Football Smackdown. So I'm the only primary host on the show, but I've been having great guests on over the last few weeks. It's a ton of fun, especially now, we've just been kind of talking some general evergreen content. So definitely go back, check that out, give that a follow. I'm really looking forward to diving into, once we get even closer and closer to August, we'll be covering everything that you need to know for redraft leagues and such. Going to provide some content, obviously in season for start sits and those types of things, but just enjoying it, man, just having fun with that thing. I'm writing a couple articles a month for Fantasy Pros right now as well. And then writing for Red Shirts Fantasy Football as well. So just in a lot of different places, hopping on pods whenever I can. So again, man, I really do appreciate the invite, man. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah, no problem. I'm so glad that you were just the first guy that I wanted to reach out to you first, and then and I got you on. And you hit me up immediately at like you said, like 4 a.m. So that was awesome. Yeah. Dude, that SmackDown pod is so much fun to listen to. And I love how and it's something that I try to do, because I have a podcast that I do like during the off season, like the real off season when nobody's really doing much for football content. It's called Behind the Analyst, where I grab a guest and then just kind of we talk about things more so. There's no like football analysis. It's more so about their lives and stuff like that. I call it like the fantasy football like Ellen DeGeneres show, right? Like where you're just talking to people, figuring out more about like the humans. And behind the analysts, right? Behind the Twitter profiles and the Twitter pictures and stuff. So, and that's something that I really love about your SmackDown podcast, is that you try to dive into that as well too. You have the questions at the beginning, then you rank things at the end, and do all that stuff. And it's super fun to listen to, because you see that human being side of fantasy football analysts. And I mean, yeah, like we don't agree with everybody on our fantasy football takes, but again, like everybody can agree, that like, bacon and eggs in the morning is like fantastic and stuff like that, right? Everybody can agree, that who the best like dads are in TV and stuff like that. I mean, maybe you don't agree, but I mean that's like we're all like the same people, right? Like it's super fun, and I love that element to the SmackDown podcast, and I recommend that to everybody out there. If you want to learn a lot more about the guests, the awesome people that Kyle brings on, it's a really awesome podcast to listen to and stuff. So awesome stuff, man.
Yeah, thanks. I was really striving to just get some unique questions, again, not necessarily fantasy related, to just get to know these people a little bit more, because I've had some people on I'm familiar with, but I'm really looking forward to now like even get some other people on that I don't know as well, and give the listeners a chance, because like you said, you don't always hear those types of things and get to know those people, and sometimes it's the you make those connections in a different way, as opposed to just like, oh yeah, I stumbled upon this, or I agree with you fantasy wise. Like if somebody is on my show, like, oh yeah, that's my top 5, movie villains too, or whatever, get that debate going, like just something different. I think we could all use a little bit of fresh things go right now. Sometimes it just gets a little bit, monotonous. So really mixing it up, but man, it's been a ton of fun. So I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So to all the people out there watching, thank you so much for tuning in, watching. Hopefully you took something away from this redraft mock draft. Like I said at the beginning, we're going to start moving through and doing all of these redraft content through the rest of the summer into 2020 season. Hopefully it happens. But that's at least the plan for drafting lessons. If you're not already, please subscribe to the DLF YouTube channel. Ring that notifications bell to be notified every time we drop a new video, like these drafting lessons videos, the ADP show with Ryan McDowell and Dan Myler, the mailbag with Chris Allen and Adam Wilde. We had a new show drop, Mannequin Chill. That's Scott Connor and Shane Manila. It was an awesome show. That was episode 1 that just dropped last Friday. They recorded episode 2, and that's coming up this week. So that's an awesome one too. And then the Commissioner Chronicles with Nathan Powell as well too, giving you all the goods and stuff from a Dynasty commissioner standpoint, the ins and outs of commissioning, some of the technical side of that. It's a lot of good stuff coming from a lot of different people at DLF, and we got more content in the works that's coming to you, more versus episodes with more guests, and then we head into the 2020 season. So awesome stuff. Please, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Subscribe, ring that notifications bell, drop a like, drop a comment down below if you agree or disagree with any of mine or Kyle's picks, and we can talk in the comment section and do all that. So again, one last time, thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you guys next week with another episode of Drafting Lessons. See ya.